On the night of March 26, 2002, in Jiajia Zhuangzi Village, Zhaoyuan County, Shandong Province, China, a woman's scream suddenly pierced the air. Murder! After receiving reports from villagers, local police quickly arrived at the scene. At a single-story house on the east end of the village, a crowd had gathered. Police cordoned off the area and entered the house. The sight that greeted them made everyone present shudder. On an old bed lay a young couple, motionless and no longer breathing. Both had suffered severe injuries, with the woman's face so badly mutilated it was unrecognizable. The scene was utterly gruesome. The investigation progressed rapidly, and the identity of the killer, along with the murder weapon, a sharp axe, was soon revealed. However, the truth that came to light stunned even the most seasoned investigators. The perpetrator was none other than the homeowner, Zhao Yuling. The victims on the bed were his own daughter, Zhao Qing Xiang, and her husband, Wei Bin. The heart-wrenching scream that had broken the silence came from the first person to discover the scene, Xu Guixin, Qing Xiang's mother. Upon witnessing the bloody scene before her, she collapsed and fainted on the spot, unable to bear the shock. Yet just a few days before the tragedy, Guixin had been proudly telling everyone that her daughter Zhao Qing Xiang and son-in-law were visiting from America. Everyone envied her for having such a successful daughter. Who could have imagined that in just a matter of days, this family would be struck by such a devastating tragedy? During the investigation, police interviewed the neighbors of the victim's family. They reported that in the 2 days leading up to the incident, loud arguments could be heard coming from the Zhao household. Yuling had been heard berating his daughter harshly, and people had seen Qing Xiang crying, her eyes red with tears. When news of this case broke, it became headline news. People were discussing it everywhere, wondering how there could be such a father in this world. We don't know how much hatred this father had for his daughter, but we can imagine that the problems existing in this family were certainly not just a matter of 1 or 2 days. So what happened to this family? Zhao Qing Xiang was born in 1972 in a remote rural area of Shandong Province, China. At that time, the idea of favoring boys over girls was very common. There was even a saying, "If a daughter is born, the father will be so angry he won't be able to swallow his food." This saying reflected the bitter reality of a girl's value in the old society. Her father, Yuling, was the embodiment of outdated feudal thinking. When Qing Xiang was born, instead of a joyful welcome, he showed only utter disappointment and turned away. In his mind, and in many people's minds at that time, only sons could be relied upon in old age and inherit the family legacy. In their eyes, daughters were no different from spilled water, eventually belonging to another family after marriage. Therefore, from the moment she was born, Qing Xiang was unwelcome, an unwanted presence in the family. 2 years later, Zhao Yuling finally realized his wish when his wife gave birth to a son named Zhao Qing. He threw a big party, inviting guests from all around, as if he wanted the whole world to know, "I have a son." Clearly, with a son in the family, the parents' hearts leaned towards one side. The daughter, Qing Xiang, became like a burden no one cared about. At just 2 years old, she was left in the care of her elderly grandmother. When the son was born, joy filled Yuling's heart. Every day he was beaming, his mouth stretched in a constant smile. He would place his son on his shoulders, proudly parading around the village as if to show off his precious child to the world. All the best and most nutritious things were prioritized for the boy. But fate had other plans. When Qing Quan was 3 years old, he unfortunately contracted meningitis. In today's world, this might not be such a big problem. But at that time, the local medical standards were quite backward. Doctors even treated meningitis as if it were a common fever. As a result, the illness kept recurring, forcing the Zhao family to borrow money from everywhere for treatment. Despite this, the disease was not fully cured and left behind epilepsy as a complication, which would flare up from time to time. Epilepsy is a neurological disorder characterized by recurring seizures, which can be long or short. During an attack, if there's no one around to support or help control the person, it can cause falls and even bone fractures. This terrible disease not only tormented the child's body, but also became a mental burden weighing on the entire family for many years to come. Zhao Yuling, with a heart heavy with disappointment, couldn't hide his sadness and dissatisfaction. In his outbursts of anger, he often vented his fury on Qing Xiang, making her the victim of unwarranted beatings. Growing up in such an environment, Qing Xiang gradually became withdrawn and quiet. However, the light of knowledge opened a new path for the young girl. When she stepped into school, it was like a rebirth. Her teachers became beacons, illuminating the way forward for Qing Xiang. The saying, "reading changes destiny," became her guiding principle, deeply ingrained in her mind. From a young age, Qing Xiang was very diligent, studying hard and often achieving the highest scores in exams. But even so, she still couldn't please her parents. Yuling even wanted her to drop out of school. He begrudged the tuition fees and wanted to save all the money for his sick son. Fortunately, kind neighbors intervened, helping Yuling see the issue from a different perspective. They pointed out that with Qing Xiang's talent and diligence, her future was sure to be bright. The money she would earn in the future would far exceed what the family could get if they made her quit school to work now. Faced with this logical advice and to save face, Yuling reluctantly agreed to let his daughter continue her education. Deep down, he began to nurture the hope that one day she would become an effective money-making machine for the family. Thanks to this decision, Qing Xiang had the opportunity to enter high school. She deeply understood that this was a precious chance to change her fate, to escape poverty and the constraints of traditional family life. With determination, she poured all her efforts into studying, while also working part-time to reduce the burden on her family. In 1987, she brilliantly became the top student in the entire county and was admitted to a prestigious city high school. For the next 3 years, she persevered in her studies, working and studying simultaneously, never ceasing to strive. Finally, Qing Xiang's efforts were rewarded. In 1990, she passed the entrance exam and was admitted to the chemistry department of Nankai University with excellent achievement. At that time, the probability of a college student coming from a rural background was very low. In 1990, 2.83 million people in China took the college entrance exam, but only 610,000 were admitted, a mere 22% acceptance rate. Moreover, since 1952, Nankai University had become a key national university. Therefore, a college student like Qing Xiang was truly a source of pride for the family. In their village, it was a cause for great celebration. At that time, she was the first college student from the entire village. For a while, villagers rushed to the Zhao house to offer congratulations. Some said that having a daughter admitted to a prestigious university was a great achievement for the father. Others said that Qing Xiang would surely be successful and earn a lot of money in the future, allowing her elderly parents to enjoy a comfortable life. This time, Zhao Yuling heard nothing but praise, and he felt somewhat elated. He began to dream that the whole family could rely on this daughter in the future. So he told Zhao Qing Xiang that she must earn money to support the family and her brother after graduation. Carrying this heavy expectation, Qing Xiang boarded the train to Tianjin with a heart full of passion but also anxiety. She understood that from this moment on, everything depended on herself. Despite growing up in a family that favored sons over daughters and facing unfair treatment from a young age, Qing Xiang was a very responsible child. She felt she should do her utmost for her family. As the elder sister, she absolutely couldn't neglect her sick brother. For Qing Xiang, who had just stepped out of the mountains, coming to a big city for the first time was a significant culture shock. During her college years, Qing Xiang constantly worked part-time as a tutor and waitress while studying diligently. She hardly spent any of her family's money and even managed to send some of her earnings back home. On weekends, when other classmates were out having fun, Qing Xiang was either working or in the school library studying or in the laboratory conducting experiments. Throughout her 4 years in college, her name appeared on the scholarship list every semester. This hard-working and ambitious girl also found love, which she hadn't initially expected. A male classmate named Wei Bin developed feelings for Qing Xiang. Wei Bin was a local from Tianjin, and his family was relatively well off. At first, when facing Wei Bin, Qing Xiang felt somewhat insecure. Not being good with words, she didn't know how to express herself. But Wei Bin treated their relationship very seriously, and gradually, his sincerity allowed Qing Xiang to open her heart. When Wei Bin learned about Qing Xiang's background, he didn't look down on her rural origins or difficult family circumstances. Instead, he became even more protective and caring towards her. For Qing Xiang, this was the first time in her life she felt she could rely on someone. The feelings between the two young people gradually deepened, and they began planning their future together with hope. In 1994, Qing Xiang was about to graduate from university. As an outstanding graduate from Nankai University, she was highly sought after by various employers. Finding a stable job was almost guaranteed. However, the person most excited about this was not Qing Xiang, but her father, Zhao Yuling. He had been waiting for 4 years, and finally his daughter was about to graduate. The prospect of her earning money to support the family seemed within reach. However, Qing Xiang had 2 decisions of her own that surprised her father. First, she had been accepted into Nankai University's graduate program and wanted to continue her studies. Second, she and her boyfriend Wei Bin had developed a deep relationship, and they planned to get married after completing their graduate studies. When Zhao Yuling heard this, he was furious. In his eyes, 3 more years of study meant wasting time and money, and his sick son couldn't wait any longer. Moreover, he didn't agree with Qing Xiang marrying someone from so far away. Of course, it wasn't because he couldn't bear to part with his daughter, but because he knew that if his daughter moved far away, how could he conveniently ask her for money? However, Qing Xiang was very determined and had a clear plan for her future. She insisted that she must pursue her graduate studies. At the same time, she promised her family that she wouldn't ask for any money during her graduate studies and would work part-time to contribute to the family. She also told her parents that as a graduate student working on projects with her advisor, she would earn money, sometimes even more than if she went to work immediately. Hearing this, Zhao Yuling reluctantly agreed. So Qing Xiang and Wei Bin began their graduate studies. During this time, in order to keep her promise to her family, Qing Xiang lived frugally and sent money home regularly every month. However, throughout this period, her parents never asked how she was living. They believed that it was only natural for children to send money to their parents. Qing Xiang's life during her master's studies was even more difficult than her undergraduate years. Wei Bin, seeing the hardships she faced, felt heartbroken. Due to her commitment to sending money home, Qing Xiang often had to rely on her boyfriend for support. However, the adversity only strengthened their relationship, deepening their bond and mutual understanding. The year 1997 marked a major turning point in the lives of Qing Xiang and Wei Bin as they both completed their master's degrees. At the same time, the wave of studying abroad in the US was surging, and they decided to seize this opportunity to expand their horizons and knowledge. With her outstanding academic achievements, Qing Xiang was fortunate to receive a full scholarship for a PhD program in the US. However, when her father back home heard the news, he was furious. He scolded Qing Xiang, accusing her of being ungrateful, saying that her parents had raised and educated her, but she didn't know how to repay their kindness. Despite her father's harsh words, Qing Xiang remained firm in her decision to go to the US. Perhaps from that moment, Zhao Yuling began to harbor a seed of resentment towards his daughter, allowing it to silently grow in the shadows. On the contrary, Wei Bin's family fully supported the couple. Before going abroad, they decided to get married. The wedding was held in Tianjin, and all the expenses were covered by Wei Bin's parents. Yet, in such an important moment in their daughter's life, Qing Xiang's parents did not attend. On one hand, they were dissatisfied with their daughter going abroad. On the other hand, it was rumored that Yuling didn't want to prepare a dowry for his daughter and used that as an excuse not to attend. Even worse, Zhao Yuling took the 50,000 RMB, about $6,000 bride price given by Wei Bin's family for his daughter. Wei Bin and his family could only grumble at the unreasonable actions of the in-laws, but they didn't realize that, for someone like Zhao Yuling, there were no limits when it came to asking for money. To support their son and daughter-in-law's further studies, Wei Bin's parents spent 22,000 RMB, 2,600, to prepare luggage and buy plane tickets for Zhao Qing Xiang. They never mentioned asking their son and daughter-in-law to repay the money. 6 months later, Wei Bin also wanted to switch to IT and secured a self-funded scholarship for a PhD program in computer science at a university in the US. Taking this opportunity, Qing Xiang returned to China for a brief visit, and afterward, the couple began their journey of studying abroad in the US together. Life in the US was tough for Qing Xiang and Wei Bin. A college friend of Qing Xiang recounted, "I once visited them. Their frugal life was something many people back home could not imagine. To earn money and send it back home, Wei Bin worked at a Chinese restaurant every day after school. Qing Xiang never dared to skip a class or miss a day of school out of fear that the university might revoke her scholarship." Despite all the hardships, the couple worked tirelessly on their studies. By 1999, Qing Xiang became pregnant. After much consideration, they decided to keep the baby. But because of their difficult financial situation, Qing Xiang had to return to work in the lab just over 20 days after giving birth. The newborn, less than a month old, had to be left with neighbors as childcare costs in the US were prohibitively expensive. After a month of struggling due to financial pressure, the couple reluctantly sent their 50-day-old son back to Tianjin to be cared for by Wei Bin's parents. Under the weight of financial and academic pressures, Qing Xiang and Wei Bin constantly faced significant stress. Especially after sending their son back to China, Qing Xiang often cried when talking to her friends on the phone, saying, "I miss my child so much, but I have no other choice right now." While Qing Xiang and Wei Bin were struggling with their lives abroad, their young son was fortunately well cared for by Wei Bin's parents. From the end of 1999 to 2002, for 3 long years, Wei Bin's parents raised their grandson with all their love. They never asked for any financial support and constantly encouraged their son and daughter-in-law not to worry and focus on their studies. They deeply understood the challenges that the young couple faced in a foreign land. In stark contrast was the attitude of Qing Xiang's family. Her parents never once traveled to Tianjin to visit their grandson. Just as when she was studying for her master's degree, whenever her parents called, it was always to ask for money. They assumed that since their daughter was able to study abroad in a wealthy country, she must be making plenty of money. Zhao Yuling demanded more and more money from his daughter, claiming that the house needed to be rebuilt, and asked her to send funds. At that time, Qing Xiang's life had become so difficult that she had to count every penny, but she couldn't bring herself to refuse her father's request. Somehow, she scraped together $1,500 and sent it back home with filial piety. As soon as he received the money, Zhao Yuling immediately used it to build a brand new house in their hometown. He didn't hesitate to boast that the money came from his daughter, who was studying for her PhD in the US. 4 years quietly passed. By 2002, Qing Xiang and Wei Bin finally completed their PhD programs. With her outstanding academic performance, Qing Xiang received a job offer from the prestigious American company, Johnson & Johnson, with an impressive starting salary of $60,000 per year. At the time, this was a dream income for many Chinese people. As for Wei Bin, he was hired by a renowned software company. Although his salary wasn't as high as Qing Xiang's, he still earned around $35,000 annually. They finally saw a glimmer of hope, as it seemed they could have a stable life in the US. The most anticipated aspect was that their financial situation would soon allow them to bring their son to the US to raise him there. After being apart for so long, Qing Xiang missed her son dearly. Therefore, the couple decided to return to China to visit their family before officially starting their new jobs, and to bring their son to the US. With their future looking brighter after overcoming numerous hardships, they were filled with hope for a better life ahead. Before the 2002 Lunar New Year, Qing Xiang and Wei Bin returned to China as planned. Their first stop was Wei Bin's parents' house in Tianjin. As soon as she entered the house and saw her son after such a long time apart, Qing Xiang was overcome with emotion and embraced him. However, the child cried and ran to his grandmother instead. This broke Qing Xiang's heart. Nonetheless, she was deeply grateful to her in-laws for taking care of their son all these years. In gratitude, she gave them $10,000 to repay their kindness. Back in Shandong, when Zhao Yuling heard that his daughter and son-in-law were returning to China, he called constantly to urge them. What he wanted, of course, was nothing other than money. To pay for his son's medical treatment, he had spent all the money Qing Xiang had sent from the U.S. and even incurred debts. Zhao Qing Xiang, at 28 years old, still hadn't found a wife, and due to his epilepsy, he didn't have a stable job. Zhao Yuling was anxious and went around asking families with daughters of marriageable age, hoping to find a wife for his son. At the time, a girl from a neighboring village who worked as a substitute driver seemed like a match, but her family demanded that they buy a house in the city. Upon hearing this, Zhao Yuling started plotting. This time, when his daughter returned to China, he would demand more money to buy a house for his son's marriage. Qing Xiang and Wei Bin had initially planned to bring their son along to Shandong, but as they were about to get into the car, the boy started crying and refused to go. Left with no choice, they left their son with his grandparents. When they arrived at Qing Xiang's parents' house without their grandson, Zhao Yuling and his wife were visibly unhappy. Though they didn't say anything, they were inwardly upset. They thought, surely their daughter and son-in-law were too proud to bring their child to the countryside. Suppressing their anger, they all forced smiles and sat down to a meal together. After all, it was the first time the son-in-law had officially visited their home. During the meal, when Qing Xiang mentioned her job in the U.S. and how she could earn $60,000 a year, Zhao Yuling's eyes lit up with excitement. He went straight to the point, demanding that Qing Xiang give him 80,000 RMB, about $10,000, to buy a house in the city for her brother. Faced with such a request from her father, Qing Xiang wasn't surprised. Over the years, even while studying in the U.S., she had continuously sent money home to her parents. She had grown accustomed to this. But Wei Bin felt differently. He thought that, even if they were her biological parents, they couldn't treat their daughter like an ATM. However, Wei Bin remained calm and tried to reason with his in-laws. He explained that the current house with its 2 courtyards was already quite good, and it would be enough for Qing Xiang's brother when he got married. Besides, he and Qing Xiang had just secured jobs in the U.S., and once they brought their son over, their living expenses would significantly increase. As soon as Zhao Yuling heard this, his face darkened, and he angrily shouted, "So you don't want to give us the money, do you?" At this point, Qing Xiang tried to mediate between them, explaining that they truly couldn't come up with that much money right now. On this trip home, they had already given Wei Bin's parents $10,000, so they didn't have much left. After saying this, she handed her father $1,600, promising that once they were settled in the U.S., they would send more money. Unexpectedly, this frankness only fueled Zhao Yuling's anger. He yelled, "Why do you give so much to your in-laws and so little to your own family?" He accused Qing Xiang of being ungrateful and heartless. Hearing this, Qing Xiang became emotional. She had bottled up her frustrations for years and finally let them out. She explained how she had saved every penny to send money home, paid for her brother's medical treatments, and even helped rebuild their house. Even while pregnant and physically weak, she had worked extra jobs to earn money. But none of this made an impression on Zhao Yuling. He continued to yell, demanding $3,000 as a deposit for his son's house, threatening that if she didn't give the money, she shouldn't think about leaving. Qing Xiang, overwhelmed by emotions, finally broke down and ran out, crying. Seeing this, Wei Bin couldn't sit idly any longer. He had witnessed firsthand the struggles his wife had endured over the years. He confronted his father-in-law, telling him not to use his position as an elder to bully others. He added, "You can ask for money, but whether or not we give it is our decision." After these firm words, he rushed after Qing Xiang. At this point, the conflict had reached its peak. Fearing that he wouldn't get any money, Zhao Yuling hurriedly told his wife to go calm their daughter down. However, Qing Xiang genuinely had no more money to give, and her mother didn't know what else to say. That night, Qing Xiang and Wei Bin comforted each other, reassuring themselves that in just 2 more days, they would return to the US, and this ordeal would be behind them. However, Zhao Yuling spent that night tossing and turning, unable to sleep. He kept thinking, if my son never gets married, the Zhao family line will end, and I will never be able to show my face to the neighbors again. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. He recalled how Qing Xiang had once vowed, back when she was studying for her master's degree, that she would never abandon her family and would always support her sick brother. Now, with her arrogant husband backing her, she no longer seemed dependable. Fuming with anger, Zhao Yuling muttered insults under his breath. The more he cursed, the angrier he grew, until his rage overtook his reason. In the dead of night, on March 26, 2002, while Qing Xiang and Wei Bin were sound asleep, they were brutally murdered by her father's sharp axe. On July 4, 2002, the Yantai Intermediate People's Court in Shandong Province held a trial for Zhao Yuling's murder case. In court, Wei Bin's mother sobbed uncontrollably, asking how Zhao Yuling could have been so heartless. The judge also questioned Zhao Yuling about his motive for the crime. Even at this point, Zhao Yuling showed no remorse. He stated, "My children grew up but couldn't meet my demands. What good are they to keep around?" He only regretted allowing Qing Xiang to study so much, saying, "Her education ruined her heart. She no longer obeyed me or helped her brother." That day, the Yantai Intermediate People's Court declared Zhao Yuling guilty of intentional murder, sentencing him to death, stripping him of his political rights for life, and ordering him to pay 10,000 RMB, about $1,200 in financial compensation to the plaintiff. After the sentence was passed, Qing Xiang's uncle and brother, Qing Quan, filed an appeal to claim Qing Xiang's inheritance, specifically the $10,000 she had given to Wei Bin's parents. However, the court dismissed their claim. Later, the court inventoried Qing Xiang and Wei Bin's belongings. Aside from their return tickets to China, they had only $1,000 left. They didn't own any other assets in the US. Finally, on October 28, 2002, Zhao Yuling was executed in Zhaoyuan, Shandong Province. Afterward, Xu Guixin and her son, Zhao Qing Xiang, left Jiajia Zhuangzi village, living in anonymity and renting an apartment in the suburbs. When a reporter later tracked them down, Xu was working at a leather jacket factory, while Qing Xiang had become an unemployed drifter. After that, there was no more news about them. Qing Xiang's life was truly tragic. Looking back at her short life, one could say that she had continuously fought to overcome adversity. But the final outcome leaves one feeling profoundly sorrowful. This story is not just a heartbreaking case, but also a stark warning about the generational conflicts in a rapidly changing society. Hopefully, from this tragedy, we can all learn valuable lessons to build a more just and compassionate society, where dreams and success are a source of pride, not a burden, for every family. Thank you for watching today's video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss other gripping cases from our channel. See you in the next video.